So the next slide, we're going to talk about victim blaming. And I know even myself, like I said, before I got into this line of work, I did this as well. And I know a lot of us do. Um, and so victim blaming, it occurs when a victim is someone is a victim of a crime and they're held either partially at fault or entirely at fault. A lot of people tend to focus on what the victim is doing and what she should be doing. So why is she staying in the relationship? Why doesn't she just leave him? She must not care about her kids. There's probably 100 things you can think of that you've either thought yourself, said yourself, or heard someone else say. And it really shifts the focus off of the abusive partner. Um, Even when you hear people talk about abusive partners, you may hear them talk highly of an abusive partner, but really downgrade the victim. Well, the abuser, he must be provoked. She must be crazy. He maybe just had a bad day, or maybe he had a really bad life growing up, or he was a victim himself. And so there's a lot of sympathy that tends to come with abusers versus the victim. And I think it's because people assume that victims have the ability to make this decision. And a lot of times they don't. So societal views of victims are demeaning and untrue, and societal views of abusers are skewed and inaccurate. It's dangerous because if the survivor knows that you or society blames them for the abuse, they're not going to feel safe coming forward or comfortable talking to you about it. The way that you react when somebody discloses to you determines whether or not they're ever going to share again. It's really important that we put our biases and our thoughts behind us, and deal with the victim when they're in front of us and that kind of thing, instead of, it's not the victim's fault or responsibility to fix the situation. We need to understand that it's the abuser's choice. And by engaging in victim blaming attitudes, society allows the abuser to perpetrate relationship abuse and sexual assault while avoiding accountability for their actions. One reason people victim blame is to distance themselves from an unpleasant occurrence. I hear a ton of women say, well, that would never be me. That would never happen to me. I would never allow that. And that is so far from reality, because it's not like, again, these guys just come in kicking the door in. It's so subtle, and they love these people that are doing these things to them, and it gives a false sense that it couldn't happen to other people. By labeling or accusing the victim, others see the victim or survivor as different from them. People tend to reassure themselves by thinking, well, I'm not like that person and it wouldn't happen to me. And we need to understand that that's not a helpful reaction to victims. This is what victim blaming looks like. And again, you may have these thoughts and views, but again, you need to put those things to the side when someone's disclosing to you, because you really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. The reality is the statement assumes that the victim is equally to blame, when in reality, abuse is a conscious choice made by the abuser. Abusers have a choice in how they react to their partner's actions. Here's some barriers to why somebody may or may not leave the relationship. They may not even realize that they're a victim of abuse. Sometimes we have women come that they haven't experienced physical violence yet, so they don't think that they're appropriate for our services, when in fact they very much are. They may not identify as a victim. They may know that they get hit, but they may just not understand that they're a victim. Economic necessity, isolation, fear. Once you're in shelter, you're homeless. What are you exposing your kids to when they're in shelter versus what you're exposing them to at home? You may have guilt and just hope. I think hope. Nobody wants to, quote unquote, break up their family. You may have strong cultural or religious ties. Your family, a lot of victims will say to me, the most manipulative person besides the abuser is usually the abuser's mother. That is such a reoccurring theme, because the abuser's mother is usually the first one to try to talk her into staying in that relationship, because he just needs someone. Always remember that victims often love their partners, They're motivated by the pity and the compassion that they feel. So after an abusive incident, if he's saying things like, if you leave me, you'll just be like everyone else. No one's ever cared for me. I was abused, and you should be sympathetic to that. So the victims are motivated by their compassion and pity. When an abuser uses drugs or alcohol, of course, the victim's going to believe that that has something to do with the abuse. Well, he only abuses when he's drunk. But, usually when you take away the drug and alcohol, there's still abusive tendencies happening. And if alcohol and drugs were the cause, then anybody who drank alcohol or did drugs would become abusive. And that's just not true. Do alcohol and drugs escalate a situation? Sure, but they're not the direct cause. So again, we talked about some of the other things that are listed there as well. If you ever think you may suspect that someone's going through domestic violence, you can ask direct questions. A lot of the victims that I've worked with over the years, probably most of them has said, there was people around me that knew what was happening, or I know they suspected something happened, but they never said anything. They never asked me. They never said, are you okay, or what's going on? So don't feel like it's out of pocket to ask somebody, hey, are you in fear of your partner? Are you afraid for your safety? Are you experiencing domestic violence in the home? Be very direct. Never ask in front of others. Of course, you want to pull them somewhere private. We need to listen, believe, and support. That is the biggest thing, because if you don't believe them, it's not going to affect your life any. If you don't believe them, it may affect their life. Validating. This is a crime. You shouldn't have to go through this. There are ways to get help. And just that bottom question, what can I do for you? What is the one thing I can do to be supportive to you? Acknowledging their harm that's being caused, letting them know the abuse is not their fault, believing that the victims know what's best to survive in their situation. They know their abuser's best. So when you're telling them you should do this, you should do that, you need to really listen to what they're saying and what those barriers are, because they understand the dynamics of that relationship the best. Again, you may be the first person they ever disclose to, and so your reaction really sets that tone. What you can do is just know your local agencies and what services we provide. Get on our website, look at the different services we provide. If somebody wants to come and just talk to an advocate, the biggest thing is to hear what their barriers are. A lot of times it's, well, I don't want them to call the police. We're not going to do that. We're victim centered. We follow the client's lead. We will never take a step without that client saying, take this step with me. They are not obligated to take any of our services or continue any of our services just because they reached out on the hotline, or just because they came in and talked to an advocate just to get a little bit of education or validation. They're not obligated to leave their abuser. If they want to stay with their abuser, we will talk to them about safety planning in the home to try to minimize the amount of damage done, during an abusive incident, ways they can stay safe by, not going into a bathroom because you can't get out of a bathroom, staying out of the kitchen because there's weapons in there. If you know an abusive incident's going to occur, maybe go somewhere where there's an exit door, or ball yourself up so small that the damage is minimal. We're going to support any decision that they want to make, whether it's staying or leaving. And so when you're talking to a person about maybe reaching out for our services, these are some of the things that you can reassure them. Find out what they're scared of, and try to come up with ways to help them overcome those fears, and so that they can get help. They can contact us by phone, email, website, our Facebook page. And as mandated reporters, I don't know if any of you are, but as DCFS mandated reporters, we need to make sure that we're calling in these reports when there's children present in the home with domestic violence, even if they're not in the room. That's not up to us to decide whether that's qualifies as an emergency or not. So I just recommend calling in any of those reports. And most of the time, if the person hasn't had a ton of DCFS exposure and they haven't already been told by DCFS to stay away from that abusive partner, most of the time DCFS will do what they can to assist that client in keeping her and her children safe. They're not just going to come in and rip the kids out of the home unless there's something really severe happening. and then the victim not being willing to take on the service plan or the safety plan that DCFS creates. Figure out who else can support the victim if they're not, most victims aren't going to come to us first. They're not going to call us first and say, I think I'm having, domestic violence in my home. You guys are the ones that are going to hear first. You're the ones that they're going to reach out to first and say that this is happening to me. So definitely it's important to know what your role is and what your local agencies are. And then as far as we go, we're a 24-hour hotline. We have the Facebook page, the website, and our services are listed there at the bottom. Does anybody have any questions? That's the end of the PowerPoint, so we can just open it up to any questions, comments, concerns, clarifications. It looks like everybody's on mute, so if you do have a question, you'll have to unmute.
I had a question about what it looked like when someone reached out to Freedom House, whether it was calling the hotline or something else. What can be expected during that contact?
Well, if someone calls out and they, we'll have a lot of times someone will call and say, I really don't know what I'm looking for. I just know that there's things going on in my relationship. And we'll just kind of open it up to tell me about what's going on. And, we'll validate what they're saying, and we can help to, educate on power and control and really help them to make up their own mind whether they believe that that's domestic violence or not. And then once we do that, if that's really all they needed during that call, then that's where the call will end. But if they, if we read between the lines and we know that maybe they're in physical danger, we'll say, would you like to know more about maybe an order of protection or ways you can stay safe in the home? Or do you want to hear about our services? And if they say, yes, I'd like to hear more about services, we'll talk about the different options. And if they're not ready at that time, then that's okay. At least they're going away from that phone call with a little bit of knowledge that there is someone out there that can help when they're ready to do that.
So calling the 1-800 number versus calling, I know that like the Princeton location has a direct number. What is there a difference in someone would respond?
No, it's actually the exact same phone. So either number, they can call just the direct number. They can also just show up, or just call and say, I'd like to just talk to somebody in person. And usually there'll be somebody here that can meet with them. And really it's just about meeting them where they're at. And there's, no obligation to make any decisions when you call. It's just whatever you need during that phone call.
All right. Thank you.
And it doesn't really matter either how many times, a client could come in and begin counseling and feel like, I don't want to do this anymore, and just fall off. And then maybe they want to call a month later and say, okay, I want to restart. We're going to welcome them with open arms. Even with shelter, if you come into shelter and you stay for 2 nights and you're like, oh God, I can't make this decision right now, and you leave, we're not the kind of agency that's going to say, well, we'll help you the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth time you leave, but not the 6th time. So.
Do y'all have, do y'all like go back if somebody were to decide, well, I'm just going to go back to them? Do y'all like catch up with them? Do y'all check on them in that like in between stage if they decide they want to go back, and, do y'all check up on them at all?
We don't, and there's a couple reasons for that. First, we want to respect their autonomy and their decision to go back. And 2, it's because we don't know what kind of control that partner has over them. And so we don't want to put them in a dangerous situation by calling their cell phone, and having our number on their phone, or having their abusive partner pick up the phone or walk in when they're talking to us. So we just make sure they know, where we're at and how to get a hold of us. And we just wait for them to call again. We do our counseling. It's good to know that we do counseling. Usually we start at age 5, but it really is, we have to kind of screen that age first to see if they're appropriate for counseling. If you have a teenager who maybe has abuse by their parents, we can provide a teenager 8 90-minute sessions, totally confidential, without parents' knowledge at all. But if the child wants to continue after that, then we would have to reach out to a guardian or parent. But we can come to the school and provide that counseling for 8 90-minute sessions.
Has your services changed a lot with the pandemic happening?
We've been doing in person. They really haven't changed a lot. I think, we've been able to offer a lot more. We use DoxyMe for counseling and things like that. It's more confidential. I think that also helps just because we're so rural and people have a hard time affording driving here for the counseling, but I wouldn't say they've changed too much. We've always stayed open 24/7 in the shelter. We're still doing in-person counseling and orders of protection. So, we're still chugging along and doing things to make it as accessible to clients as necessary.
I know that you had recommended that we go to your website and look to see kind of what services you guys offer. I know that I saw that you guys have like a parenting class on there. And I was curious, are a lot of your services only offered, like your education services, only offered to people who are victims of domestic violence, or are they open to the community?
It's just for domestic violence victims.
Okay.
That's how it's funded. So you have to be a victim of domestic violence to receive the 10-week parenting and the 10-week DV education, because it's focused on DV and parenting. It's not like a general parenting curriculum.
Mhm.
It's totally linked to domestic violence in the home. So if someone needed parenting, but there was no domestic violence, it really wouldn't be a help to them because they're not going to be familiar with that material. It's not going to really be what they need. But we do it for victims voluntarily who want to just come in and do it. But we also do it for victims who are mandated by DCFS.
Okay.
Well, if nobody has anything else, I just thank you for being interested in this topic. I could talk for days on it. I think it's really important. It affects each one of us differently. And, if you have my email address, you can email me anytime, message me anytime. If you have any questions about anything, I'm more than happy to just talk anything out with you guys and help you to help people that you know.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Well, you guys have a great day, and just let me know if you need anything. We also have tons of brochures and tear-offs, like the flyers with the numbers hanging down and you can just tear it off. We have all those. So if you need anything like that, you can just call and let us know and we'll get that stuff dropped off. And yeah, we can do that anytime. All right. Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.